Ever since its announcement, I was very excited to get my hands and indeed ears on the Creative SX-S5 or Super X-Fi carrier. The soundbar can be found for £900 or $1,000 in the UK and US respectively. Links in the description below will take you to your relevant stores. Now to kick things off, we're going to talk about its design and form factor. And why is this of importance? Well, it's the first of its kind in the respect where it's made with Dolby, and as such is also a Dolby Atmos speaker system, DASS for short. Now here, in terms of its driver configuration, it's got 7 drivers in the soundbar. There's 3 forward-facing tweeters and the other speakers which are positioned on the side, and the upward-firing speakers as well to give you that Atmos effect. Now the subwoofer is an absolute unit. It's a 10-inch driver to be specific. It's bigger than most soundbars that come with a subwoofer unit, and indeed the subwoofer does deliver a lot of low-end grunt, and we'll talk about that in the sound quality section. Now it's quite intriguing over here because this leads me on to inputs and outputs, and the reason I say this is because the subwoofer has a 3.5mm jack input and the soundbar has the 3.5mm jack subwoofer output. Now why should you care again about this? Well, because if you are a gamer you want the lowest latency as possible, and as such that subwoofer connection gives you that wired connectivity. If you don't want that, then you can rely on wireless, and I can say subjectively, watching movies or indeed terrestrial TV, I had no issues with any sort of lip sync delays or any sort of delays with the subwoofer and the main soundbar unit. Now this brings me perfectly on to the actual inputs and outputs of the soundbar, which is really impressive. There's 2 HDMI 2.1 inputs, which is perfect for avid console gamers out there. It's also got an eARC or ARC output for your TV, and then it's got optical and USB Type-C should you wish to connect it over to a PC. So yes, you can use this if you had a media PC connected with it. Its inputs and outputs are seriously impressive in this domain. Now elsewhere you do also have a USB input. Now the USB input is purely for the Super X-Fi technology, and this really leads me perfectly onto that technology. First off, what it is, well, in a nutshell, it's a way of having a head map, a personalized head map of your own head, and then for you to then upload that information to the headphones, and therefore the headphones to give you a personalized experience. Now that personalized experience allows you to have a kind of hi-fi setup but on a set of headphones, therefore giving you kind of this spatial awareness, almost like you're watching content from a set of speakers or a soundbar rather than having a stereotype of input. Now my personal experience of it has been very positive in the past, and it's no different over here. The carrier, and including with the theatre headphones, delivered Super X-Fi technology. Now I should also stress that the Super X-Fi or SX-Fi technology does not work on the soundbar output, so to speak. The only output the soundbar does is via that USB output. So in other words, it's a way of carrying, in other words the SX-Fi carrier, thus the naming, is using that Super X-Fi technology and transmitting that off to that USB dongle, and then allowing you to have that technology on a set of headphones. But wait, there's another little catch. There's a 3.5mm jack output at the front of the SX-Fi carrier. And yes, indeed, you can then plug in a set of traditional headphones and enjoy that Super X-Fi technology yet again. Now the principle remains the same. It might not be as customized and as optimized with a set of, let's say, SX-Fi certified headphones, but you'll still get that kind of lifelike reproduction from your own set of headphones should you wish to plug them in via 3.5mm jack. And of course, if you don't want that technology, you can easily disable it via the remote. Now, Super X-Fi aside, I should also mention wireless connectivity. Now, this only has Bluetooth, and whereby the SBC codec is supported only. So you're not going to get high resolution playback over Bluetooth, and don't expect that from other competitors either. Now, it's slightly a shame, however, that Wi-Fi is not integrated. In other words, Chromecast, for example, or Apple AirPlay or something like that. Because those people who want to, let's say, listen to Tidal on their phone and stream it off to the SX-Fi carrier won't be able to. Similarly, there's no built-in assistant, voice assistant, such as Amazon Alexa or Google Assistant or anything like that. Now those are not services I personally use, but I know people out there that would use them. A way of counteracting this is actually plugging in that sort of device into the soundbar and then using it as an external device. So there's ways of getting around it, but basically see it as it doesn't have that technology built in, again, unlike some of its rivals, which might be a better option in this domain. Now moving on to the remote, I don't think it's got the best sort of build quality, but in terms of its design, at least from the frontal view, it's pretty stylish. Now it's very functionally great because it gives you all the options that you need. Now at the top you've got the different inputs, at the middle you've got the media keys and indeed the volume, and then you've got a few different setting buttons over here such as the LED indicator and the brightness toggle, and then towards the bottom you've got a few different settings. So for example, the Super X-Fi technology, you can enable or disable it. You can toggle between the speaker or indeed the headphones, bass up and down, and then also go through the different preset modes. And also you've got 6 modes over here that you can customize yourself through the app. Speaking of which, the app is also very comprehensive. Now if we were to tap on this, you can see the different sorts of inputs in terms of speaker or headphones. Then over here you can go to the different inputs and also the auto switch if you want to enable it or disable it. And if you go via TV again, you can see as to how it's being plugged in, and also if you want the eARC technology to be enabled or disabled. So very comprehensive. And then the sound modes, so you can cycle through them over here. And then you've got the Super X-Fi technology, which you can enable or disable. You'll also want to get the Super X-Fi app in order to do the head mapping and then pair up to the SX-Fi carrier, which is pretty comprehensive and very easily done, but it just takes a little bit of an extra setup step. And then you've got calibration. Now in terms of calibration, it tells you to measure the distance between you and the soundbar. In my case, I actually found that the settings that I did after putting the measurements didn't come out to what I actually wanted to. So for example, the bass level had gone to +2 or +3 and actually reduced it because it sounded quite booby, and likewise with the height information it had gone to -1 or -2. So I actually preferred to play around with the settings, but it's nice that Creative offer the option of calibration. Now, as for the custom buttons that I just referenced before, you can have them over here and you can see them, you can customize them. Now in terms of what you can do, it's somewhat limited as to what is actually available, but it's just an extra layer of customization if you choose to use it. I think most will not actually need to use that whatsoever. And then you've got the volume toggle, which directly works over here, and it works in real time as well. You probably not see it in the soundbar, but it actually does work in real time, and it's pretty impressive as to how quickly it communicates. Now elsewhere through the cog icon, you can also see the subwoofer, which is connected, the auto standby, which you can enable or disable, and also to see the display, again, to toggle between the different brightness modes, and also you can check for firmware updates. So with that out of the way, there's something else I should also highlight, and that's the audio delay. By audio delay, I don't mean in terms of audio lip sync problems, but rather the fact that the soundbar takes a little time before audio is portrayed for the first time. Be it when you're switching on the soundbar, or for example when you're muting the soundbar and then resuming, there's a little bit of a delay which takes place, and as such can be a little bit cumbersome for those people who often pause and play music. Now to demonstrate this, I'm going to go into a little audio demo. It's going to be of me speaking about the Škoda Enyaq iV on Totally EV, so in case you're wondering, do check that up on your pop-up banner. And here you'll be able to see a potential small delay, and I'll try and compare this with the Samsung HW N850 as well. Of the front bumper feeding air to efficiency whilst also bolstering its kind of sporty look. Now at the side you've got body coloured wheel arches, which is a definite plus point in my books. That's quite a bit of a mouthful and a lot to intake, so if you do want to have some more information about the different trim levels. So hopefully that little snippet gave you an indication of the audio delay. Should you care about it or not, do let me know in the comment section below. But now we get onto the most important part, it's the sound quality. Now I should mention, in terms of RMS output, it has 450 watts, which is pretty impressive, where 200 watts of that comes from the subwoofer unit, and better still, it extends down to 25 Hz. That's pretty unheard of for a subwoofer soundbar combination. And of course, hi-fi enthusiasts can get lower than that, up down to 20 Hz, but most subwoofers that come with a soundbar extend down to around 32 Hz, if not 34 Hz, and kind of tail off in that region. Now to give you a slight little taster, I'm going to go through a music demo at first, cycle through the different modes. Definitely do check out the annotations below, and then we'll go into a movie demo as well, and all while me comparing this to the Samsung HW N850, which nowadays can be compared, quite likened to the HW Q900T.
trying to kill you. Get out of here.
Now, while I appreciate my microphone setup and indeed YouTube compression won't give you a lifelike reproduction of how the soundbar performs, namely when it comes to Dolby Atmos, I'm going to give you my subjective opinion. Now, first off, we have to talk about that sub-bass extension, which quite frankly is absolutely phenomenal. I think in terms of bass, there's nothing more that I would want from this soundbar speaker setup. Here, the Creative SX-Fi Carrier really does outperform all of its competitors, at least from the ones I've tested. I don't think anything really comes close other than the fact of you going for a full-blown hi-fi setup with satellites and an AV receiver. The subwoofer does give you that low-end rumble, and in my case I had to dial it down sometimes because I just felt it was kind of overpowering for the relatively small size room. Now, not only that, but you've also got the mid-bass tones. The mid-bass tones are punchy and tight, controlled, and also can be in your face if you so wish, if you dial up that bass. Indeed, here the mid-bass is pretty much done to perfection. If you're watching movies, you're listening to, let's say, music, let's say R&B or dance, EDM, you're really going to get the most out of the soundbar. Now, with that heavy emphasis on the lower frequencies, one might automatically assume that the mid-range has been absolutely butchered. Well, here when I was comparing it to the HW-N850, which, don't forget, not too long ago was a flagship soundbar from Samsung and was truly highly rated even from the likes of myself, I found that they were actually quite V-shaped sounding in comparison to what the SX-Fi Carrier can produce. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't give you a forward-sounding mid-range. It can't really compete with the likes of the Bose NC700 or the 700 soundbar. Neither can it compete with the flagship Sennheiser Ambeo soundbar either. But for a soundbar of its class and for the heavy emphasis that you get in the lower frequencies, it's actually extremely impressive. I found myself really engaged when I was listening to dialogue or, let's say, terrestrial TV with the news on, or let's say if I was listening to a podcast of sorts on YouTube. I found that the forward-facing tweeters really did deliver that kind of high and mid to high frequencies really well and didn't leave me kind of feeling that there's something missing. Now, of course, you can pretty much assume what I'm going to be saying about the highs because here the high-end frequencies do a phenomenal job. Given the forward-facing tweeters, I had no issues whatsoever with the high tonality or in terms of the high extension. I would have potentially liked a little bit more extension at that top end, but quite frankly, I think most people will be very pleased with the overall performance of the SX-Fi Carrier in this department. And finally, we get onto the soundstage, and here I'd say it's arguably the SX-Fi Carrier's weakest point. Now, don't get me wrong, in comparison to other 5.1.2 channel speakers out there, I don't think they can even stand a chance with the SX-Fi Carrier, let alone in comparison to the frequency range that this soundbar offers. However, when you compare the price and then you look at what you can find out there on the market, you're looking at 7.1.2 or 11.1.2, and indeed you've got a far amount of drivers. Now, I did mention the DASS sort of configuration, and indeed it's being tuned by Dolby, and that's all well and good, but the driver configuration or the number of drivers that you get in the SX-Fi Carrier in comparison to its competitors at its price point means that its competitors can offer a better instrument separation and to a degree better width and depth when it comes to soundstage. Now, there is of course the different sound modes which allows you to kind of customize that surround sound effect. Now, in my opinion, I found that the music and movie modes just weren't all that impressive. In fact, they kind of skewed with the vocals in some way and just kind of detracted from the overall experience that I received. Then you've got the super wide mode, which in my opinion yet again does do a little bit of a better job, but it's not quite giving you a lifelike reproduction, at least not from what the test I had. Night mode completely takes out the low-end frequencies and isn't something that you might want to use in normal daytime viewing. So as a result, the only real mode that I could use was a neutral mode. And here the neutral mode does do good in comparison to other speakers out there that run on a pure stereo format, or let's say up-mixing format. And yes, by the way, in case you're wondering, all the speakers are always in use, so no matter if you're watching Dolby Atmos content or let's say regular stereo terrestrial TV, because of its DASS kind kind of configuration, it means all the drivers are constantly being used, which is something that kind of differentiates it in comparison to a regular soundbar that has a stereo input or doesn't have that sort of upmixing technology. Now, another little thing that I should also mention is that because this is a Dolby/Creative product, it doesn't have any support for DTS:X. So here is another thing that some of its competitors does offer, just purely because they don't have that close link and collaboration with Dolby, and potentially this might not affect a lot of individuals out there because DTS:X content might be a little bit more scarce, but it's something I should mention for videophiles out there who might potentially be looking for that metadata. And so this all leads me on to my verdict. Would I recommend the SX-Fi carrier? Well, frankly, I've been left really impressed by its compact form factor and the overall sound quality that you get. It's arguably the best compact Dolby Atmos soundbar that I've heard to date, and period, in terms of what you can find in the market. Its subwoofer is absolutely class leading, inputs and outputs are phenomenal, and the Super X-Fi technologies just adds the cherry on the cake should you wish to choose it. The problem, however, is its overall asking price. At the time of making this review, it can be found for £900 in the UK and $1,000 in the US. At that price point, you can find the Bose 700 soundbar, which far exceeds in terms of overall mid-range reproduction. You've got the Samsung HW-Q900T, which can only be compared to the likes of the N850, and if not a little bit better. And then you've got the JBL Bar 9.1, which kind of detachable speakers might give you a bit better roomer acoustics. Ultimately, all I'm trying to convey over here is that there's some cool alternatives that you should consider and might be better for your money, given that they can also be found at a cheaper price tag. But don't get me wrong, the SX-Fi carrier does a phenomenal job, and as a result still deserves some sort of commendment for its performance, and of course gets my performance award for, well, its overall performance. Now, if you like this independent, detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like and subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be appreciated. Now, if you've got any questions, post them down in the comment section below, and do let me know if it's the soundbar that you would be picking over some of its rivals. Alright, I've been totally dubbed, take care of yourselves, and goodbye.